special month for especially the power of the Rosary in history. So one of the great events that took place in October nearly 500 years ago, October 7th, 1571, was a great battle just off the coast of Greece, a little village named Lepanto. So it's called the Battle of Lepanto. There was a huge armada from the Ottoman Empire, a Muslim empire. And for decades, they had been trying to build up their strength to take over Europe. And that is the tactic of the Mohammedans from the time they were founded in the 600s, is they don't just convert people, they conquer countries and impose their religion. And so one of their great leaders said, I want to stable my horses in the Basilica of St. Peter's and put a turban on the Pope. So they had assembled this great armada, 300 galleons, 300,000 soldiers, and they had set sail to try and conquer Rome. Pope Pius V, who before he became Pope was a holy and saintly Dominican friar, and also very devoted to Mary through the prayer of the Rosary, he called to form a League of Nations against this threat. He called for a great Rosary crusade because we needed heaven's help. What was at stake is not some political conflict, but a great spiritual conflict. It was the truth and authentic love against the lie. The Pope chose a very young leader, age 24, known as Don Juan of Austria. He had been successful in other battles in Spain, and he was chosen to be the admiral of the Christian fleet. Spain and Venice contributed the ships, about 285 ships, much smaller than the ships that the Muslims had. They had about 70,000 soldiers, many of them unfamiliar with naval warfare. Don Juan of Austria, he gave these orders. He forbade any kind of blasphemy aboard his ships. He asked for a 3-day fast. He said there were to be no women on the ships in order to avoid all temptations to lust. He brought Jesuit, Dominican, and Franciscan priests on board to provide confession for all the soldiers and absolution. Every man was issued a rosary. That's 70,000 rosaries. And at the same time, Pope Pius V was calling for a great rosary crusade in the city of Rome, in the surrounding regions, extending to all the Christian Catholic nations. On the eve of the great battle, Don Juan led all his men in praying the rosary. On the morning of October 7th, Mass was celebrated on every ship. And the battle ensued shortly after that. And it looked like the Christian fleet was in great trouble because the wind was against them and a great fog was enshrouding the enemy armada. A great shroud of fog. And then suddenly the wind changed. It reversed direction, filling the sails of the Christian fleet. And the fog changed and began to enshroud the Christian fleet. There was a 5-hour bloody battle. And it was an amazing battle because over half of the Muslim armada was sunk. Over 30,000 of their soldiers and all of their captains died, including their admiral. And it was a great victory. And it prevented the onslaught of this Muslim army to try and take over Christian Europe. The soldiers, everybody, complete unanimity, attributed the victory to Our Lady of the Rosary. And basilicas and churches, and this feast day on October 7th was established to honor heaven's help in that victory. Just going to briefly mention some other historical events that have been important and affect us today. So yesterday we talked about Fatima. I just want to repeat the answer of little Jacinta to the question, what did Our Lady emphasize most to you in the apparitions? And her answer was, pray the rosary daily. Now we're going to jump forward to Brazil, 1964. They have a president who wants to lead the country in a communist revolution. And so he's organizing rallies, and in one of his public speeches, he ridicules the Catholics of the country, he ridicules the rosary, and he says his communist ideas would be the ones that reform Brazil, not the rosaries of simple women. This caused 20,000 women to come into the streets of this town where he was holding a rally. They marched into the middle of his rally and prayed the rosary so loud that his rally fell apart. Following that, on March 19th, 600,000 people marched in Sao Paulo praying the rosary in honor of the God-given meaning of human dignity, of marriage and family. After that, this communist president fled the country. And then over 1 million people gathered again in a rosary march in Rio de Janeiro, praying the rosary in thanksgiving. So it was like a communist revolution completely averted through the power of the rosary. Move forward to 1986. So we are now in the Philippines, a very Catholic country. And we have a dictator named Ferdinand Marcos. Even though he's supposed to be in a democratic country, he has his main opponent assassinated at the airport. The cardinal of the country gets on the radio and says, "My people, our country needs heaven's help. Come into the streets. Bring your rosaries. Let us ask God for help. Let us unite with Mary in asking for this help." Over 10 million people came into the streets. They were standing shoulder to shoulder on the main freeway that ran from the military fort all the way into downtown Manila, praying the rosary. And then as some of them became tired, other people would take their place. And this went on for a number of days. Marcos ordered his air force to start dropping things to disperse this crowd. His air force mutinied. They were saying, "I can't drop something on my grandmother down there or my sister down there." He ordered the army to roll out the tanks and disperse that crowd. And you have memories and pictures, burned into the memories of the people of religious sisters kneeling in front of these tanks, leading everybody else in the Rosary. The soldiers march forward with their guns, and people put flowers in the barrels of their guns and continue to pray the Rosary. And after all that, Ferdinand Marcos and Imelda fled the country. And so his murderous dictatorship was defeated without a shot being fired. So we come now to Madera and our state of California and our nation of the United States, and the whole world. We know that we are called the church militant because we are in a battle, a great battle between good and evil. We have an invisible enemy, a satanic enemy. During our generation, the assault on the human race is greater than it has been in all of history. Especially when we just look at that one issue of whether the inalienable right to life that's given by God to every human being created in His image and likeness is going to be respected. It started being disrespected in a big way in 1917 with the Communist Revolution, and you have an atheistic ideology, no God. Well, if there's no creator, what does that do to the dignity of the creature? And so you end up with state-sponsored abortion in Russia and the Soviet Union. Uncountable the number of innocent human lives wiped out through that evil. I read one statistic that said that every Russian woman in a city over their period of fertility had an average of 7 abortions. Why? Because the value of the human person was defined as how much they could produce for the communist state. And so they said, the women are more valuable in the factories than raising children. And so they imposed that anti-life evil on a whole culture and society for 70 years. And then the same anti-God, godless culture takes over China and then tries to take over as many places in the world. It's a movement that wants to dominate the whole world. And then it begins to creep into our culture. We don't call it communist yet, but it's secular. It leaves God out. We have even dominant political parties that want to completely leave God and religion out of their programs. And they are promoting state-sponsored abortion. Over 60 million surgical abortions have taken place in our country since 1973. We can't count the number of chemical abortions. And we have major political forces and politicians promoting this, calling evil good and calling it reproduction rights. So this is a great evil we are up against. I'm very proud of our parish, our pro-life ministry that is very much involved in fighting against this evil. And just as the Cardinal of the Philippines said, my people, we need heaven's help. Our country needs heaven's help. Come into the streets. Bring your rosaries. And so that's why we're here this afternoon, at the hour of mercy.